First of all, benvenuti, welcome everyone. And I think most of you know me, but a brief introduction for any newcomers. My name is Anne Robichaud. No, I'm not Italian American. You can tell by my surname, which is actually French Canadian. Grew up in the United States and my life changed studying in Rome, junior year abroad. Came back to Italy after I did my credential work at Berkeley to teach in the mid 70s. And I wasn't going to marry an Italian, and his name is Pino Alagna. From Palermo, Sicily, we moved together to the hills outside of Assisi in 1975, worked the land, learned everything from our rural neighbors about working the land and about life. As you may remember, if you saw my second, I believe, talk, Rural Life Revisited. I had an English school for many years, then became a tour guide. We've raised 3 lovely children, and now we're the happy grandparents of 2 grandchildren. One, alas, is in California, but little Milo is right next door in Perugia. And I am continuing to work as a guide, but not as a guide out on the streets. I'm working as a guide, guiding you through the treasures of Italy through these virtual experiences. It's a joy to share Umbria with you, and it's a special joy to share Easter. And the traditions of Umbria certainly come alive for us in the extraordinary presentations of great emotion, theatrical, historic, and artistic events which take place in Umbria throughout Holy Week called La Settimana Santa. And these traditions are rooted in the Middle Ages and lived with great passione by the locals, from the elderly to the young. As you can see in this photo, look at those young boys on the right holding high their candles during the Gubbio procession. You can see Giuseppe on the left, a retired teacher, gently putting flowers on the dead Christ. You can see the proud elegance of the people in Montone in the photo in the bottom row, the gentleman in red. And so we're going to see, as we learn about these traditions, we are going to live with the people, let us say, their great passion for these events, for the sacre rappresentazioni. Sacre rappresentazioni, sacred representations, are literally street theater. They're deriving from the acting out of the highlights of the ecclesiastical liturgy. The liturgy of the church first moved to the piazzas and then to the processions, organized by the members of the confraternity. Listen to that word, confrate, with my brother. The medieval brotherhoods, the lay brotherhoods, which focused on the spread of piety, works of charity, and the acting out of Christian mystery plays so as to bring the liturgy to life at key moments in the liturgical year. Due to the strong emotions and complexity of the scenography, the Passion was the most frequently presented of these events. As one priest said, and maybe this was about 60 years ago in an article that I read, these processions were better than 100 masses. Why? Because in the procession, you enter the reality of the liturgy with your full heart. The beautiful medieval hill towns of Umbria are perfect backdrops to these medieval processions, most of them rooted, again, in the Middle Ages. Assisi, gorgeous hill town at the foot of Mount Subasio. This is somewhat the way we're seeing it now. Snow on Mount Subasio. It's quite cold out, actually. The beautiful backstreets of Gubbio lend themselves beautifully to the Dead Christ procession in Gubbio on Good Friday. And some of you will be very familiar with Gubbio after my recent talk on Gubbio. And the cherry race, the Mad Passion of May, is there on Good Friday as well. The same sense of passion as they're participating in yet another festival. The beautiful backstreets of Bevagna lend themselves very well to their Easter celebrations. And this is the charming hill town of Montone, just outside of Perugia, not too far from Perugia, a population of only 1,600 people roughly, and they have a glorious celebration on Easter Monday. But we will start our talk this evening in the city of Assisi, because I'd like to start our discussion of Holy Week by talking about Holy Thursday. And the Holy Thursday event, so dear to the people of Assisi and the surrounding towns, takes place in the Cathedral of San Rafino, which you can see here, 12th century Cathedral of Assisi, cathedral seat of the bishop, named after San Rufino, Saint Rufinus, first Christian bishop of Assisi who was martyred and is buried in that cathedral. A cathedral of the 12th century, though we'll see in some of my pictures, the interior was all restored in the 16th century. So the tradition of the Holy Thursday event takes place in the Cathedral of San Rufino, and protagonist of that event is the Christ crucified, which you see in this image to the right. This glorious 17th century Christ crucified. This is a Cristo deposto, depose, take down. It's a processional crucifix. The Christ could be taken off the cross, carried in procession for the veneration of the people, to inspire piety in the people, and then put back on the cross. The symbol over Christ's head, which is done actually in stucco and was done in the 18th century, a symbol of the crucifixion is 3 nails, and they're tied with a ribbon. So Cristo deposto, or Cristo crocifisso, Christ on the cross, is in a side chapel in San Rufino. You can see here the architecture is very much not Romanesque, but it's 16th century neoclassical. And the Cristo deposto will be carried through the streets of Assisi Good Friday morning. And Good Friday evening, Christ's sorrowful mother, La Madre Dolorosa, this statue, which is also in the Church of San Rufino, will be carried to go and meet her son. Meet him in the Basilica of St. Francis, because that statue of Christ will be taken off the cross on Holy Thursday, and on Good Friday carried through the streets of Assisi to the Basilica of St. Francis. I want to thank Marco Francalancia for some of these photos, the ones in color. He's an Assisi photographer, and he has taken a photo here on the left of a couple praying before the Cristo deposto. This is certainly Holy Thursday, because they have mounted the portable ladder, which 2 priests will climb up after the Holy Thursday Mass, called In Cena Domini, the Lord's Supper, really a memory of the Last Supper of Christ with his apostles. So after the In Cena Domini Mass, 2 priests come over to the side chapel. They climb up this ladder, tenderly clean the Christ with a soft white cloth, and then comes the moment of la scavigliazione, and this is the name of this ceremony. The literal meaning is the denailing, the taking out of the nails from the hands. And the priest will first take the nail out of the right hand, Christ's right hand, then out of his left hand, and then the arms can be lowered and laid next to his side, and he's carried down from the cross. During this ceremony and during the processions of Good Friday, there's one in the morning and one in the evening, and we'll be joining the people in those processions. They are singing the lauds, medieval hymns, and one of the most famous collections of lauds, probably the most famous collection in Italy, is the Laudario di Cortona. It is of the 14th century. It's a collection of medieval lauds, over 66 medieval lauds, written on 171 parchment pages in the 14th century. and jealously conserved in the city of Cortona in one of the museums. The lauds are hymns which inspire great emotion, great feeling. They're intended to involve the people fully in the events, particularly the events of the scavigliazione and the passion of Christ. On the left, you can see the two priests gently lifting down the Christ. They carry him down the steps and they put him on a funeral bier, as in B-I-E-R. We call it a catafalco. And this is a bier used for the carrying of a body after a death, or carrying someone extremely ill from one place to another. And you can see how lovingly he is placed on this catafalco. These are all the people around in the Cathedral of San Rafino. These black and white photos are the work of a talented young photographer of Assisi, Andrea Cova, and I wish to thank him as well for the use of his photos. I have a lot of people to thank. Marco Francalancia, as mentioned, did the color photos. And these are the people lined up to pay their respects to the Cristo Morto, or the Cristo Deposto, you can also call it, the Christ down from the cross. And they will come up, touch his forehead. Some will lean over to kiss him. They might leave him flowers. And an Assisi friend, Pier Maurizio della Porta, who's a great historian and also gave me a lot of information for this discussion of the scavigliazioni, told me that also some Assisani would bring a bouquet of flowers to the dead Christ, place them on his body, leave most of the flowers, but take home one or two to their own home, flowers which had touched the dead Christ. And here you can see that some people simply pray, others, again, touching the forehead, leaning over to kiss the thorns at times, leaving the flowers, again, whispering a prayer perhaps to the dead Christ before they leave the church on Holy Thursday. The Cristo Deposto, remains in the Cathedral of San Rufino all night, Holy Thursday night, and Good Friday morning, he will be carried in procession from the Cathedral of San Rufino to the Basilica of San Francesco. And he will be carried in procession by members of the medieval confraternities who carry him on their shoulder. And he will be following penitenti, like this gentleman here, who is wearing sackcloth, a white one, a hood crowned with thorns, and he'll be barefoot. And the penitenti carry heavy wooden crosses from the Cathedral of San Rufino down to the Basilica of St. Francis. Those of you who've been with me in Assisi or have been to Assisi know that's quite a walk. It's a good kilometer at least, and they're carrying a heavy weight. The penitenti are hooded because that is a sign of penitence. You are not to let people know what you're doing. This is a sign of humility. And no association with that unsavory organization developed in the United States, formed in the United States in 1866, and we all know it's called the Ku Klux Klan, and their hoods have the purpose of terrifying those poor Black slaves. They were representing ghosts, shouting shrill noises and so forth, and hooded, representing a ghost for terrifying people. In the case of the penitents, the person is hooded to hide their identity, thus fully doing penance. This is Good Friday morning. This Signor of Assisi has come to pay homage to the Christ before he's carried away. Other people here are kneeling to pay homage to Christ. You can see the catafalco here in this lovely wine-colored velvet. This is one of the confraternity members who will be carrying the Cristo Deposto. This is another penitente who will be preceding Christ and has come to bid to bid homage to Christ, to pray, to perhaps ask a favor, to assure him that he will be with him along the walk. You can see he's barefoot. Notice the glass in the floor. The floor was all restored when the cathedral was made anti-seismic after the earthquake of September 26, 1997. And after they did the restoration, they left the floor open with glass so that you could see actually the remnants of the floor of the 12th century cathedral, because all this architecture here is due to 16th century restoration. So the procession is ready to depart on Good Friday morning for the Basilica of St. Francis. This too is a penitente here on the left. He's dressed in gray, some dress in gray, some dress in white. Two confraternity members are opening the heavy doors of the Cathedral of San Rufino, and the procession leaves the Cathedral of San Rufino. You can see penitenti carrying the cross, and they're barefoot. Confraternity members flanking them, and confraternity members carrying the Cristo di Posto. And in this photo, we have the Cathedral of San Rufino at our back, and you can see here the magnificent papal fortress of the 14th century, the Rocca Maggiore, which I'm sure those of you who've been to Assisi have probably explored. They will be heading through Assisi, stopping at 3 cloistered convents on their way to the Basilica of St. Francis, so that cloistered sisters can pay homage to Christ crucified, or the dead Christ, Cristo morto. And the procession is hauntingly beautiful. This procession is early morning. There is no noise in the city of Assisi except the dull thud of a single drum. It's wrapped in black, the color of death, and it beats out the rhythm. There's no other noise in the city. And it is beating out the rhythm for the procession, but it also is the announcement that Christ is coming. And you can see confraternity members here with the red capes are part of the confraternity of the Cathedral of San Rafino, a medieval confraternity organized in the 14th century. We see here a penitente, also called a crocifero, because that is someone who carries the cross. More confraternity members, and here is the Cristo di Posto being carried. These are quite moving photos, or very evocative photos, shall we say, of Marco Francalancia, of 2 of the penitenti in the procession. One of the first stops could be the convent of the Poor Clares. The Poor Clares are called in Italian Clarisse, and they are cloistered. They are followers of Clare of Assisi, 11 years younger than Francis, who in the mid-13th century took upon herself the life Francis espoused, that of denial of possession and poverty. Not all Franciscan sisters are cloistered. Not all are Poor Clares. There are also Franciscan teaching sisters, nursing sisters, or whatever. The Poor Clares have chosen to live their life in cloister. So inside the cloister, sometimes it will be their turn to pay homage to the Cristo morto. This young woman has probably not yet taken her final vows. She's probably either a novice or a postulant. After the Poor Clares that year paid their homage to the Cristo morto, the procession left the Basilica of St. Clare. You can see it's coming away from the stunning Basilica of Santa Chiara. Those of you who've been to Assisi will remember its beauty. It is enhanced by the pink and white limestone quarried on Mount Subasio. Inside, the arches go to a point. It is a Gothic church inside. The buttresses here will sustain and support this Gothic church. The buttresses on this side of the basilica, on the right side as we're looking at it, are filled in now because that is where the convent of the Poor Clares is. Convent in Italian, let us remember, is called monastero for the sisters. Convento is the residence of the friars. So the procession continues. The next stop this particular year was going to be that of the monastero, or the convent, of other Poor Clares, Clarisse, of San Quirico. This name will be very familiar to you if you were able to join in my talk Holocaust salvation in Assisi, as we recall that the convent of San Quirico, or the Monastero di San Quirico, gave shelter to Jewish refugees during World War II, hid many of the 300 Jewish refugees hidden in Assisi, all saved. If you were not able to participate live in that talk, do remember it is on my virtual experiences page. You may enjoy listening to that talk. So the Clarisse of the Monastery of San Quirico, they are waiting, they're praying, they're chanting, they're waiting the arrival of the Cristo Morto. The door is open, and they will soon hear the boom, boom, boom of that single drum. And they've prepared a pallet covered with beautiful embroidery, which I'm sure they did. And then the Cristo arrives, and he's carried into the convent of the Clarisse. We're now inside the convent, seeing Christ being carried in. He's put down on the pallet. The sisters come forward and pay homage. Some will give him flowers, kiss his feet. This sister is tenderly rubbing his arm, saying her prayers, while this elderly sister is about to lean forward to kiss his feet. These two nuns here have already paid homage, and they're returning to their places. And after homage is paid by the sisters, the Cristo Morto is carried out. You can see the people outside. They're near that funeral bier, waiting for the Christ so that the procession can continue. When he's placed on this funeral bier, one of the confraternity members, in this case this is Giuseppe Marini, he is organizing all the flowers and putting them beautifully around Christ's body, because as the procession continues, the amount of flowers will increase along the way. Now we're very close to the Basilica of San Francesco. The drum is beating, announcing to those at the Basilica we're almost there. The drummer is followed by one carrying a cross. This is not a penitente. He's not hooded. This is a confraternity member. These people with red capes are of the Confraternity of San Rufino. And it looks to me that this year, right in the procession, this is the Bishop of Assisi. I can tell by his red hat here, and there is the Cristo Morto right behind him. They're arriving now at the Basilica of San Francesco, right behind the Cristo Morto. The wall that wall is that of the convento, that is the monastery where the Franciscans live. I took this photo some years ago, and I want to have a copy made and send it to, I call him Padre Mauro, but he's no longer Padre Mauro. This is Mauro Gambetti, who, when this was taken, was Padre Custode of all the Franciscans in Assisi. And Padre Custode is the terminology given by the Franciscans to their superior. Not Father Superior, but Father Guardian, because he takes care of all his brothers. Do you know where he is now? In Rome. We're very excited. He has been appointed cardinal. So we now have Cardinal Mauro Gambetti. I'm sure he'll be thinking of us on Easter in particular. He's thinking about Assisi all the time. The Christ is carried into the Basilica, and the Cristo Deposto is now placed in front of the altar in the lower Basilica of St. Francis. We remember it as two levels, Basilica Inferiore, Basilica Superiore, and all during the day there will be veneration of the Cristo Deposto in the Basilica of St. Francis. You can see the confraternity members here. They've just placed the body down, and the faithful who are in the procession, the religious are in the procession. They're singing the lauds as well. Nuns, clergy, these people all participate in the procession, and they're about to leave the church after paying homage to Christ. Interestingly, where is he placed? Almost right over the tomb of St. Francis of Assisi, because the tomb of St. Francis is under the altar of the lower church in the crypt. Francis died in 1226. The basilica started in 1228. This lower basilica was finished in 1230, and in 1230, Francis was interred in the crypt. And then work continued on the church. The upper level finished in the mid-13th century. All day long, people drop in to pay homage to the Cristo Morto, the Cristo Deposto. And then in the evening, the Sorrowful Mother statue, which is in the Cathedral of San Rufino. And here we can clearly see that the architecture is 16th century. So we have a neoclassical restoration of the Romanesque church, because the church is of 12th century origin. The Virgin will be carried down. She is going to seek her son. This image is called a Madre Dolorosa, 17th century statue, and the 7 swords represent the 7 pains and troubles which mark the life of the Virgin. And she will be carried by confraternity members throughout the torchlit streets of Assisi, preceded by the penitenti, who are barefoot, crowned with thorns. Lauds are sung throughout the procession, and they will also be singing, traditionally in Assisi, they're singing the Stabat Mater. Stabat Mater, literally meaning the mother standing. This is the mother suffering at the foot of the cross. And the clergy will sing in Latin, and the populace answers in the vernacular. The Stabat Mater is a hymn dedicated to Mary's suffering, and it has Umbrian origins. It has been attributed to the Franciscan friar Jacopone da Todi, who wrote several lauds in the 13th century and was an early proponent of Italian theater. He was one of the earliest scholars to dramatize gospel themes. And there is the Sorrowful Mother being carried through the streets of Assisi. Look at this beautiful scenography of medieval Assisi with these 13th, 14th century pointed arches. And let us remember that these confraternities, most of them are born in the 14th century, 13th century, 15th century. The procession continues down to the basilica, and here you can see that they're singing the lauds. And in this lovely photo of Andrea Cova, we're right behind the Blessed Virgin as she arrives at the Basilica of St. Francis. She is now in front of the upper basilica, Gothic church, finished in the mid-13th century. The flying buttresses here and these towers are indicating that the architecture is Gothic. She'll be then carried down the steps and will enter into the lower basilica. She has come to meet her son. Now, let me see if it's possible here. I'd like to show you this event of Assisi on Good Friday. The Sorrowful Mother is being carried out of the Cathedral of San Rafino. You can see the 7 swords. There's the fortress. Look at the carabinieri in their plumed hats for special processions. Absolutely silent. At some points there is the singing of the lauds. There you can see the Madre Dolorosa now arriving at the entrance of the lower basilica. Penitents have gone in, and Christ is being carried out now of the basilica and will leave the basilica, followed by his mother, the Madre Dolorosa, and they will both be returning to home, the Cathedral of San Rufino, where they will again stay until next Holy Thursday, when Christ is taken down from the cross, the scavigliazione, and Good Friday, when they are leaving in procession. This is the re-entry into the Cathedral of San Rufino. Notice the police are staying out, just the religious and the popular people go in, the local people. And you can see the Virgin has been brought in, and now Christ has been brought in. The Cristo Deposto, that gentleman on the left was the bishop. And there is the Sorrowful Mother, and she's now back in the Cathedral of San Rafino. And she'll be there until Good Friday of the following year. another extraordinary festival for Good Friday takes place in Gubbio. Their Processione del Cristo Morto is a splendid event, also because of the exquisite setting of medieval Gubbio. In my talk on Gubbio, I said that it is a medieval town per eccellenza, par excellence. Nothing has been taken away and little has been added. So what a backdrop to the Processione del Cristo Morto di Gubbio, sponsored by the Confraternity of Santa Croce della Foce. We have a document of the 15th century attesting to the existence of this confraternity, but we think that it is certainly much older than the 15th century. And the procession in Gubbio will be a procession in which, also here in Gubbio, Christ is carried on a funeral pallet, and his sorrowful mother will be following. And this is all organized and sponsored by the Confraternity of the Holy Cross, Santa Croce. This is a lovely image of the 17th century statue of the crucified Christ. These extraordinary photos of Gubbio are all thanks to Paolo Tosti, who's absolutely a wonderful photographer and was a great source of history, information, local input about the Gubbio festival. And I would like to thank him very much, this Gubbio procession. So the start of the festival or the procession is the Church of Santa Croce della Foce. A Foce is a low-lying area. And the church, which is now a Baroque church, is built on the site of a pre-existing medieval church. And that medieval church was in proximity to the pre-Roman walls of ancient Ecuvium. That name will be very familiar to you if you were able to see my Gubbio lecture. That was the name of the town of the pre-Roman inhabitants of Gubbio, an Italic tribe. And it is thanks to that Italic tribe that Gubbio has one of Italy's greatest archaeological treasures, which we learned about in my Gubbio talk, the incised bronze tablets about the religious rites of these pre-Roman Italic people. The church is all changed now. It's a lovely 17th century Baroque, and the procession will start from here. It is opened by 4 confratelli, also called sacconi in Gubbio, because they're wearing these huge white sack-like tunics, and they're hooded. And the Eugubini call the hood the buffa. The word for hood in Italian is cappuccio. And you'll be very familiar with that. If you like to drink your cappuccino, it's a hooded coffee. What's the hood on the cappuccio? It's the steamy milk that's put over the espresso. And they are starting out the procession, and they're carrying the battistrangole, which they shake. There is no single drum in Gubbio. There is the noise of the battistrangole. The battistrangola is basically a wooden board. It has an iron ring or handle on it. When it's shaken, it makes a dull, pounding, quite eerie, if you will, noise. And we're going to hear that because I want to show you a bit of video. Following the 4 confratelli, they're members of the Confraternity of the Holy Cross, come penitenti. And this one is carrying the skull. We remember that Christ was crucified on Golgotha. The word comes from the Greek word for skull, Golgotha. And after the penitenti carrying the skull becomes another penitenti carrying the tree of life, l'albero della vita. L'albero della vita comes to symbolize, by the Middle Ages, it symbolizes the conquest of life over death. The l'albero della vita is first introduced to us in the book of Genesis. And following l'albero della vita are other crosses carried, 3. Number 1, that is the cross of Christ and the cross of the 2 thieves who were crucified near him. And then a couple other crosses belonging to confraternities of Gubbio. Following the crosses are borne in procession symbols of Christ's passion. And one here has the INRI on it, that transcription put on the top of the cross when Christ was crucified, announcing that this was Jesus Christ, King of the Jews. I wanted to mention this as well. Let's go back to the skull. Look at the fires. There are fallows throughout Gubbio, many, 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 huge bonfires. Why? They symbolize purification. They also symbolize rebirth. There are no lights lit, and the candles carried in procession are often relit on these fallows. So these huge bonfires are a very important element of the procession of the dead Christ in Gubbio. You can see here the bonfires behind this sacre, who is carrying the symbol of Veronica. It is said she met Christ on the Via Crucis, and in great pain she leaned to wipe the sweat off his face, and the image of his face is imprinted on her veil, which she'd used to wipe the face. And here are more of the penitenti carrying the symbols, or the sacconi carrying the symbols of Christ's crucifixion. We remember these are the 40 pieces of silver. Judas sold Christ, it said, to the Roman soldiers for 40 pieces of silver. Following the symbols of the Passion comes the bishop and the clergy, and they're preceding the Cristo deposto, or the Cristo morto. And these are members of the confraternity. Look at their cross here, of the Santa Croce. This is the only confraternity still existing in Gubbio. And there were many, many. In Assisi, for certain, in the Middle Ages, between the 13th and 15th century, there were well over probably 15 confraternities, numerous ones in Gubbio. One still exists, the Confraternita della Santa Croce. And it is thanks to them that we have this extraordinary procession on Good Friday. It's a tradition that has been lived in Gubbio for, a couple hundred years. And in the 19th century, they're going to add a beautiful element to this procession, which is the singing of the Miserere. Now, and you will hear that singing of the Miserere, hauntingly beautiful. Christ is followed by his sorrowful mother, and the sorrowful mother image in Gubbio is very particular. She's holding beads, which seem to be almost like a long rosary. There are 33 beads on this rosary, the age of Christ when he was crucified. And this is said to represent the rushes that they bound together, the flagellanti, the confraternity members who flagellated themselves or whipped themselves. The flagellanti is a confraternity, also called the disciplinati. You can understand that terminology, to discipline oneself. Born in Perugia, founded by Raniero Fasano in 1260. And the beads are said to represent also the kinds of chains that they used to flagellate themselves, and pilgrims used to flagellate themselves when in processions of moments of prayer and penance. And this is the Madre Dolorosa of Gubbio, and you can see this long chain of beads right here. And these are some of the members of the choirs. There are 2 choirs singing the Miserere throughout Gubbio. I think they meet at the beginning of Lent, and they practice maybe once a week. The Miserere is hauntingly beautiful. It is a psalm, a penitential psalm written by King David 1,000 years before the birth of Christ, whose polyphonic melody has been passed down through oral tradition and has been an integral part of the Gubbio procession since the 19th century. Absolutely hauntingly beautiful. And the people in the procession are the only ones who will be singing the Miserere. And let's go back here. Look at these young men. Look at these young men. Yes, there are older men. Yes, there are young, impassioned men too, just over teenage years. These are the same young boys who maybe on May 15th are there for the Corsa dei Ceri, the race of the candles. This gentleman was probably one time he carried the cero, because remember, if you're a male and you live in Gubbio, you've probably carried the candles in the May 15th race with the same passion that all participate in the May 15th Corsa dei Ceri in Gubbio. They participate in the processioni del Cristo Morto. Look here too, elderly, young, a woman here too, young men singing with great passion, and the beautiful backdrop of the medieval city of Gubbio. You can see here too, many of the people very young, and I think you can see with what feeling and passion they sing. The procession also will stop at the home for the elderly, so that those who are infirm and can't participate in the procession can pay their respects to the dead Christ. You can see one of the sacconi here, and this elderly woman is being wheeled over so she can pay her homage to the dead Christ. And as of, I believe, 2 years, they've rerouted the processione del Cristo Morto so that it now passes the tomb of the 40 martyrs, the mausoleum of the 40 martyrs, which we learned about, for those who were with me in my talk on Gubbio, the 40 civilians who were martyred, executed by German soldiers, June 22nd, 1944 in Gubbio. So the procession now stops so that there is a stop with the dead Christ at the tomb of the 40 martyrs. Another place where it stops is the Pietrone, Pietra, rock. You are Peter. Upon this rock I will build my church. Pietro, meaning rock. Pietrone, big rock. You can see that they're ready for Christ to arrive because they have placed on this big rock candles, vigil lights in the form of a cross. What is the big rock? It's thought that it might have been the altar table of a pre-Roman altar of the Italic tribal people who lived in this town that was once called the Cuvium. So it's a very sacred rock for the local people. And on this rock for 15 minutes during the procession, the Cristo deposto is put down so that the local people can come up to him, leave flowers, kiss his feet, pay homage. Now, I think the best way to appreciate the beauty of this is also to see a bit of video. And I want to right now thank Rick Johnson, right-hand man, part of this family, who's done so much helping me. He does the editing of the videos. And this is before the Madonna and Christ leave the church. And these are local women coming to pay homage to Christ. And some of them actually bring cotton swabs, which will be put in the wound on the side. Here are the battistrangoli. The only noise in the streets, the battistrangoli. Now, they're still in the church. They're lowering the tree of life to be able to get it out the door. There they are. They've made it out the door. Thumbs up sign. Carrying their torches, very careful that their hoods do not reveal who they are. True penance is not letting people know these acts of piety which you are performing. These two crosses are called croci raggianti, crosses with rays of light. And they are crosses of two confraternities of Gubbio. They're a couple hundred years old. They've just been recently restored. These are the croci raggianti, crosses with rays of light. Here come the symbols of Christ's passion. There's the crown of thorns, as you can see. And now you can hear the miserere. I hope you can hear it. I'll keep quiet so you can hear it. Now the crosses are coming through the city of Gubbio. These two crosses represent the crosses of the thieves that were crucified near Christ. These are the croce raggianti again, the crosses which belong to two confraternities. And you're seeing the symbols again because we're at a different route now in Gubbio, a different part of the town. You can see the people observing in silence as the procession passes. And again, note the beautiful medieval architecture of Gubbio. What a superb backdrop this is for this very, very evocative procession. And they have red crosses on their tunics, these sacconi, because that is the symbol of the confraternity of the Santa Croce, of the Holy Cross. There's the rooster. It said that Christ said before the rooster crows 3 times, you will deny me, Judas, I believe. This is the pillar to which he was tied to be scourged. This is the dead Christ being carried through the streets of Gubbio, and he will be followed by his sorrowful mother, accompanied by the carabinieri with their plumed hats and accompanying the religious procession. These women are preceding the sorrowful mother and saying prayers, particularly to the Virgin, and rosaries are being carried, very much a symbol associated with the Blessed Virgin Mary. And these singing now are people who are part of the choir of the Virgin. And Rick for the editing. Only the choir sing the Miserere because in 1911, Gubbio's bishop mandated this, and I'd like to read this to you. A choir of cantors, all dressed in capes, under the guidance of a priest appointed by the Santa Croce Venerable Confraternity, will sing the Miserere quietly, solemnly, and gracefully. It remains forbidden for others outside this group, not dressed in capes and not appointed by the confraternity, to sing any prayers or hymns. So no one may join in the Miserere who's not part of the choir. And the Virgin and Christ are returned to the church. The procession is over. People will start to take off their hoods, start to take off their capes, and the young boys will put down their candles. And you can see with what joy they've probably carried those candles. And I can assure you that it is tremendous joy and with great passion that they too live the processioni del Cristo Morto of their beloved city of Gubbio. And now we'll take a break and we'll go to some culinary pleasures. And let us talk about Holy Saturday in Umbria and the blessing of the cheese breads. Yes, there can be egg hunts, even in an Umbria Easter, but actually prior to Easter. And the egg hunt is not for children looking for eggs, but it's a necessary task for the women because they need to gather together hundreds of eggs, or they did at one time, to make their cheese breads. I remember Mundina, and you'll recognize her if you joined in my lecture. Let's see, Umbria, Rural Life Revisited. I think it was my second talk. She and her husband, Pepe, this photo is from 1976, taught us everything about working the land and about life. And I remember on the days before Easter, a few days before Easter, probably maybe Wednesday or Thursday, coming down those steps with a huge board on her head and 15 cheese breads balanced on that board to bake in her outdoor bread oven. And to make 15 cheese breads, depending on the size, I would say she'd probably put together maybe between 100 and 150 eggs. I don't know how many kilos of her own sheep's milk cheese that she would use. And then they would have their own flour, all these farm people. Remember, she was a tenant farmer. So they didn't have any extra cash in the home. Everything they made really derived from the land, like Peppa. Here's Peppa just a couple years ago in this photo on the right, but at one time she too worked the land for a landowner. So I said to Peppa recently, I said, where did all those cheese spreads go, those 15 cheese spreads? And she said, well, 2 went to the padrone, the owner of our land, and 1 went to the priest, and 1 went to the doctor. And then, you know, she said, we lived in extended families, many people in our house, the nonni, the grandchildren, and so forth. And so those cheese breads probably lasted us for about the week after Easter. The sacred cheese breads, la torta di formaggio. Torta means cake, but this is a savory, made with cheese, and the fat used would be strutto, which is the lard used for baking of sweets, pies, and so forth. They have another lard, which is the lardo condito with salt and pepper, that's used for basting meats. But the strutto would be set aside for the cheese breads. Peppa always makes cheese breads before Easter. She makes about 10 of them still, and she has them laying on her bed on the wooden board, and will call us over, and we'll go over to visit her a couple days before Easter. And she says, now choose your bread. And this was a couple years ago, and she said to Pino, you made a very, very beautiful choice. That's a beauty, Pino. It's raised right, and it's golden. Another farm friend who makes her cheese breads is Giuseppa near Deruta. Some of you who've been with me on the Perugia Deruta tour will remember delightful lunches at the farm of Giuseppa outside Deruta and her husband Paolo. A couple years ago, I gave a Perugia Deruta tour, and it was on Holy Thursday, and were we lucky, because we arrived and before lunch went to the outdoor bread oven where Giuseppa showed us the cheese breads she'd baked for Easter time, and she showed us how she had blessed them with the olive branch. Olive branches are given to everyone on Palm Sunday at the church by the priest, because we've all pruned our olive trees, so we have plenty of olive branches. We don't have a lot of palm branches, so we receive olive branches on Palm Sunday. And she blessed them before they were baked. She blessed them after they were baked. And this is my group of Americans thrilled to meet Giuseppa and thrilled to join in this Easter tradition of the cheese breads. And you can see here the pans she used. Now, Mandina, the farm woman I showed you here, she did not have pans like that. What did she bake the cheese breads in? Well, she would save the tins or the cans that sardines came in, and she'd grease up those and bake them in those cans. And that was what she used to bake her cheese breads. And that's why they have this form, because they were traditionally made by the farm women with whatever kinds of containers or cans they could save or put together. This is a group of Americans who went to visit farm friends of ours just before Easter during my tour that people love. It's called Rural Life Revisited, and we go to visit some of our farm friends. And Chiarina had just made their cheese breads for Easter with her husband, Marino. And Chiarina and Marino were sharecroppers too. And so in the old days, the days past, she would make up to 15 cheese breads, a couple for the padrone. You'd also give 1 to the doctor, 1 to the priest, and so forth. The cheese breads are taken to the local church to be blessed on Holy Saturday. And in your basket, you will have 1 cheese bread, and then a couple hard-boiled eggs, salt, which is propitious, salami, maybe a capocollo, and red wine. And that is going to turn into our Easter breakfast, which you will shortly see. And these young girls have brought in the cheese bread baked by their grandmother. There's the cheese bread, the wine, the eggs. Rosanna has got her cheese bread back here, but she's also got the Umbrian sweet cake, the charamicola, with, colorful topping on it, and a new addition for her grandsons. Yes, she's a grandmother. Can you believe it? A chocolate Easter egg, but that's a new addition. That's not part of the Umbrian rural tradition. And you can see the hard-boiled eggs. And these Easter baskets are veritable works of art. Here's Peppa with her Easter basket. She has her salami, her torta di Pasqua, and her wine. And Peppa, at the time of the blessing, will take the cork off the wine. And she says, that's to assure you that the blessing gets into the bottle. And there's the cheese bread in this basket, the sweet cake, the hard-boiled eggs, salt, salami, and capocollo. And this is the blessing of the breads, and the women are waiting. They put their baskets on the floor, and Padre Giuseppe that day was telling them what a wonderful tradition it was, how he admired their hard work, how they put the goodness of the land and their hearts into those cheese breads, giving to their family a most glorious Easter gift. They are truly works of art. They're covered with embroidered cloths that the women generally have made. Here you can see the torta di formaggio, hard-boiled eggs, salt. There's even pepper here. There's the salami, and there's the wine. Another basket. And they come out of the basket, these good foods, on Easter Sunday morning. Imagine having a breakfast like that, and then you're going to have lunch at 1 o'clock, which will be pasta, roast lamb, and whatever. But this is Easter breakfast before Mass. A little bit of cheese bread, a little bit of red wine, salami, maybe some capocollo, maybe prosciutto, and hard-boiled eggs, drizzled with olive oil, a squeeze of lemon juice, sprinkled with salt and pepper. I hope you can join us one Easter for Easter breakfast at our house. This is, I believe, maybe last year or 2 years ago, our son Keegan, our daughter-in-law Francesca, who'd made the cheese bread for us. And Easter Sunday is celebrated with a race in medieval Bevagna. Some of you participated in my talk on Bevagna. You might be familiar with this lovely photo of the main square of Bevagna. And we see here the San Michele Church. This is the site of the Easter tradition of Bevagna. And it's a race, but it's a race that Christ will always win. He is carried in procession from one church of Bevagna, a small 18th century church, through the streets of Bevagna by confraternity members. Their confraternity is called the Confraternity of Mercy. And he will be carried into this door of the Church of San Michele Arcangelo. Mass is going on, but there's a purple curtain here at the doorway. And so the people who are hearing Mass over to our right, in other words, cannot see that Christ is inside the door. They all know he is, but they're not yet seeing him. This gentleman on the ladder is going to leap off, pull the curtain open, when the priest at the Mass arrives at the Gloria. And then Christ, the risen Christ, will make a dash to the altar. Now, the best way to appreciate this amazing event is this very short video. See the curtain, watch the man on the ladder. We're at the Kyrie eleison. It's at the Gloria that Christ comes in. Lord have mercy. Christ have mercy. Gloria. And everybody applauds. Christ is arisen. The hand is raised. Triumph over death. The Confraternity of Mercy, Misericordia, lifts him onto the place where he will be kept. And he will be there until Ascension, Thursday, 40 days after Easter. And on Ascension, he will be carried back to the small church, which is home all year. Now, I'd like to end with just a brief note on Easter Monday, which takes place in the beautiful little hill town of Montone. This photo is thanks to the Comune of Montone. You can see the word right here. And the Comune of Montone is celebrating an important relic on Easter Monday, and that is the Santa Spina, which means the holy thorn. This is one of the thorns, is said to be one of the thorns from the crown of thorns, which is one of the most important relics of the Cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris, which, as you know, took fire in April of 2019, although the crown was saved. There are no more thorns in this crown of thorns because they've been given over the centuries as gifts, often by French kings and princes, to lords, to other, to nobility who've assisted them in war, who've served them well. Some people say there were 70 thorns in this crown of thorns. I even read an article that said there were hundreds. It's unknown. But in Italy, there are well over 70 anyway of said to be crowns of the crown of thorns, which is conserved in the Cathedral of Notre Dame in Paris. And this crown of thorns, this crown from the crown of thorns called the Santa Spina, was given to Montone in recognition for having served faithfully a lord who was called Carlo Fortebraccio. And Carlo Fortebraccio was the son of Braccio da Montone. Braccio da Montone will die in the early part of the 15th century. And his son, Carlo Fortebraccio, was a condottiero, someone who conducts, who leads the troops, who organizes the populace, who conducts religious facilities. He was the noble lord of Montone. And he was given the Santa Spina, or the sacred thorn, by the Serenissima Repubblica di Venezia for having served well the Republic of Venice, militarily served well. And he mandated, Carlo Fortebraccio mandated in the early 15th century that Santa Spina, or the holy thorn, should be displayed for the view of all every Easter Monday. And it still is. And they celebrate with joy. These are the flags of Montone. There is the Montone, which means ram. We get the word mutton from the word Montone. And these are the three terzieri, or the sections of Montone, which all join together in this glorious celebration in full Renaissance dress of the Santa Spina. Again, the joyful participation of the youth, of the older people. This young man told me that he represents one of the castle guards. This is the flag of Montone with the ram. This man here told me that he represents a gofoloniere, someone who carried a banner, and he is about to read for all the pronouncement of Carlo Fortebraccio that the Santa Spina should be displayed every Easter Monday. And you can see here the great passion and joy and pride of the people Montone as they parade through their streets in the dress typical now of the Renaissance, no longer medieval, of the 15th century. So their Easter celebration is that on Easter Monday, celebrating the donazione della Santa Spina, or the donation of the holy thorn. Look at this little girl too participating. With great pride and elegance, they march through the streets, and you can see the pride here in these young boys as they're commemorating one of the most sacred festivals for the people of Montone on Easter Monday. Well, I hope you've enjoyed our visit in different parts of Umbria for this celebration called Pasqua, Easter, starting with Holy Thursday, continuing on to Good Friday, the blessings of the cheese spreads on Holy Saturday, the run in Bevagna on Easter Sunday, and the celebration of the Holy Thorn on Easter Monday in Montone. Thank you very much, and let us hope that in the not too far off future, you can come here and enjoy these festivals live.